The Honkai Star Rail, a Fool's Hand crossover event, has been live in Honkai Impact 3rd since the 7.9 version launched a couple of weeks ago, and so I wanted to take a minute to give y'all a little recap on what the event was like, what the story was, and if there's anything we can learn from this delightfully silly experience. So let's start at the beginning and go over what happened in the story for the event. You play as, well, yourself. The captain, who has had their consciousness transported into the game Honkai Impact 3rd by I, once again to help save the story of Impact 3rd. Luckily for us, I has recruited some help in the form of Vita, a mischievous, world-hopping being who has been both friend and foe throughout Impact 3rd. Unluckily for us, Vita has recently made acquaintance with Sparkle from Honkai Star Rail, a masked fool with a flair for sparking joy in unusual and often devious ways, who will also be joining us to help save the day. The TLDR from here is that one of Sparkle's colleagues is attempting to mess with the in-game supercomputer that houses the characters in the current main story of Honkai Impact 3rd. I swear it is less complicated than it sounds. So anyway, Sparkle takes the lead to act as our tour guide through various familiar locales from Honkai Star Rail in search of her masked fool companion to stop that villain from succeeding in their meddling schemes. Something to note here is that much like the Penacony storyline, all of this event takes place within a simulated dreamscape of sorts, so nothing is exactly as you would expect it to be, and therefore the simulated NPCs in the game can't see or hear our captain's meta-commentary throughout. Sparkle begins our journey much like the Trailblazers and starts us off in Herta Space Station. From here, we meet the owners of the space station and no, it is not the Herta. Instead, all of the Star Rail characters who do not already have a direct counterpart in Impact 3rd have been given amusing proxies to take on their mantles to change the story in really ridiculous ways. That means the space station is operated by the resident science duo from Impact 3rd, Tesla and Einstein. To help us get further along on our journey, the scientists introduce us to a card game called Fool's Hand. I'll explain the gameplay mechanics of this a little bit later, so for now, let's keep going over the story. In true Herta style, we are tasked with finding some curios to help unlock the simulated universe machine, which will teleport us to the next world. After returning the curios and defeating a Wababoo, we are finally able to head to the next world, Belobog on Eurillo 6. When we get there, we see some sights in the city before being attacked by some iconic trash cans, who are the stand-ins for the Silvermane Guard in this version of Belobog, who promptly throw us in jail. As we break out, Bronya shows up at the request of Sealer. Turns out this Bronya is also looking like a perfect candidate to take on the mantle of Supreme Guardian from Cocolia. And if we find the Supreme Guardian, we may be able to continue our search for the Masked Fool. Eventually, we meet Natasha, the head of Wildfire in the clinic, as she may be able to assist in getting us to the Supreme Guardian. We fight her, we fight some trash cans, Sparkle gets to wear the trash can crown before finally heading to the Engine of Creation, where the Supreme Guardian is. Here we learn the true secret of this world. We weren't on Eurillo 6. We were on Trashillo 6, a world where everyone is a trash can. And the reason Bronya was chosen as successor is because of her ultra-unique signature hairstyle, which has been sported by all of the Supreme Guardians in the past. And if that isn't a good reason to put someone in charge, I honestly don't know what is. With our work here complete, we dig into the trash cans and emerge at our next destination, the Xianzhou Lawfu, where Sushang is waiting to greet us. In this version of the Lawfu, the general has gone missing and we attempt to find him so he can help us get to our final story on this journey. In our search, we come across a mysterious merchant who our captain instantly recognizes as the Void Archives /Laucher /Auto Apocalypse. We then meet good old Welt and have a Starskiff showdown against Songshika, before Welt admits that he is in fact the general of the Lawfu in this event, and is very ready to retire. To determine his successor, Welt organizes a Blade Master competition where we must fight Sushang and the Mysterious Merchant to claim our new title as General of the Lawfu. Unfortunately for Welt, there is no rest in sight, however, as our cheeky tour guide announces to the entire ship that Welt will be taking over all administrative duties during our tenure as General. Maybe one day the poor man will get a break. And just like that, we arrive in Penacony and meet Clocky, or rather a husk nihility claiming to be Clocky, who takes us to see the Fool's Dream, which reveals that our villain has been Sampo all along. We find and confront our dear old friend, which ends with a swift and decisive kick in the butt. But the captain has noticed something. Sampo can see her, which means he is a real character, and likely not the mastermind behind the Fool's game. Of course, it was none other than Sparkle. After going head to head with her in one final game of cards, we win, of course, and save Honkai Impact 3's story, but not before Sparkle can escape using one of Sampo's smoke bombs. The event concludes with I and Vita sending the captain away and discussing the fact that they don't think it's the last they've seen of Sparkle. One final conversation then takes place between the captain and Sampo, who reveals himself to be a brand new player to Honkai Impact 3, and he asks us for some tips on how he should get started. Well, that wild ride is the story of the Honkai crossover event, so now let's chat about the gameplay. The gameplay consists of a few different elements, being the titular card game, combat, and puzzle minigames. I'll start with the main feature of the event, the card game A Fool's Hand. It's basically a cross between Marvel Snap and poker, where 3 play areas are active with unique abilities that can influence the player's score depending on what cards are played in them across a short number of rounds. The gameplay was quite fun, and you even had the option to verse other players online, which was a really nice touch to flex the skills you'd developed throughout the event. Moving on to the combat, we were treated to a number of opportunities which allowed us to fight with trial versions of Vita and Sparkle. Their playstyles and interactions are super fun, with Sparkle's unique ultimate ability bringing in the turn-based UI from Star Rail, and I just think that is the coolest thing ever. So I really liked any time we got to face off in actual combat and not just the card combat. That said, the event was filled with lots of silly puzzles and weird mechanics like a rhythm game against the trash cans and a side-scrolling shooter during our Star Skiff battle against Songshika. Both of these mechanics never showed up again, and I kinda liked that one and done, have fun and run style, which kept the story moving but brought me back into the action by throwing something different at me. Overall, this was a really fun little event for a Star Rail player. The second we stepped onto Herta's space station and the music kicked in, it just felt right. And hearing the familiar big brash sounds of a jazz band on Penacony made me really happy. And I can't forget to shout out the moment Sparkle's theme started playing right at the end of the story and her villain reveal, because my goodness, I couldn't stop smiling any time it started playing. Plus, there was a lot to laugh at as I played. Hoyo are never afraid to poke fun at the meta nature of game development and the even more absurd nature of the crossover, thanks to our captain being present for the story as it unfolds, so they were really able to ham up the dialogue. And of course, one of the best parts was seeing how they approached all the little nods to Impact 3 characters versus their Star Rail counterparts, particularly on Bellabog and the Lawfu. Seeing these characters through their original Impact 3 lens, but with a nonsense Star Rail twist, was just such a treat. And it would be rude not to acknowledge how fantastic it was to see Sparkle and Sampo doing their thing in a different world. Speaking of Sampo, his boss fight was amazing and had some fantastic mechanics, so I really hope that we get to see that sequence stick around in Impact 3 in some capacity. Now, my final thoughts. Hoyoverse are incredibly unserious. They always have been, but this event just really highlights it. That said, while it's obvious for the Impact 3 players that Sparkle's meddling is far from over, as we've already seen her pop up in the main story prior to this event, which definitely suggests that we could see Vita show up in Star Rail at some point, and it would make a lot of sense for her to somewhere down the line. But of course, only time will tell. My other speculation, and one that I have held for a long time, is that Sampo is going to get a 5-star relation upgrade at some point in the future. Given the Remembrance has just been made a playable path, it seems likely that we will get more paths, and a Sampo redo would be super logical. I have been calling it since he was first revealed to be a masked fool. Anyways, given how into the Masked Fool storyline Hoyo seems to be at the moment, I would not be shocked if they became our 4.0 focus in Star Rail. So check back in about 12 months' time, let's see if any of my theories are correct. So that's it for our Honkai A Fool's Hand crossover event. Maybe the real fool in all of this was me for thinking this was going to be a deep lore tie-in of the two games, but I'm pretty happy with what it was, so I guess I'll be walking the path of elation for a little while.